I would like to begin this class on In Memoriam AHH by drawing your attention to another poem, another even more famous poem by an even greater poet, which laments the death of a friend. And the locale of the friendship between the poet and the friend was, as in the case of In Memoriam AHH, Cambridge. The poem is Lycidas. The poet is John Milton. The friend is Edward King, who read at Cambridge along with Milton and who drowned to death in a shipwreck off the coast of Wales. In Canto 51, the poet wonders whether we should indeed desire that the dead should be close to us and should look into our lives closely. The poet loved Helen very much and constantly strove, constantly took efforts to win the appreciation of Hallam. Had Hallam discovered some secret shame, some hidden guilt in the poet, would Hallam's love for the poet been decreased, been reduced? The poet says that death is great, not merely because he destroys life, not because he destroys life, but because he bestows wisdom on those whom he slays, on those whom he takes away. The dead are wise, and the poet will conceal nothing from the eyes of the dead Hallam. The poet works out a sort of identification between the dead Hallam, watching over him, and God watching over him. The poet requests the dead to be near us, to watch over us with the eyes of the all-seeing God. As we climb to the heights of virtue and fall into the depths of vice, and to make allowance for it, for the latter, the poet complains that it cannot be that he loves Hallam truly, because had he loved Hallam, his words would have brought to life the image of Hallam instead of being mere words, the froth of thought. The spirit of true love censures the poet against this self-accusation. It points out that there is no record of the lives of the great men of the past, not even a detailed account of the life of that one person who lived an absolutely sinless life, Jesus Christ, the perfect human being, the Son of Man who was also the Son of God. In the last stanza, the poet says that the presence of the dead is like the presence of God. The dead possess the all-seeing eye of God. No human fault can escape this eye, but God's all embracing mercy is capable of forgiving human frailties. The poet should not worry about the flecks of sin. He will gather his wealth ultimately. The shell will be the shell will be separated from the pearl. Here we come across the Christian concept of sin. The whole of humanity is drenched in sin. That is the Christian point of view. When Adam and Eve ate the fruit of the forbidden tree, they brought sin not just on their own heads, but also on the entire human race. The human race consists of children of sin. Not just that, the absolutely sinless life is an impossible one. Every human being commits sin frequently, from time to time. And if there is a sinless life, it is a life of Jesus Christ. In Canto 53, the poet says that it is better to experience both good and evil and then choose good on the basis of that experience. The father, now a sober man, among his boys, among his sons, had a wild youth, a youth full of noise and nonsense. It can be argued that the experiences of his youth, the experiences of his wild youth, were responsible for shaping him into what he is today. But then the poet corrects himself. Though it may be true, this is a dangerous doctrine. The doctrine that you must taste both good and evil, and that based on that experience you must choose good. It would not be advisable to preach such a philosophy to the young who are circling round and round the eddy. The eddy here stands for passion, the eddy here stands for vice. Though it may be a sound philosophy, a sound doctrine, it is also a dangerous doctrine to be preached to the young. In Canto 54, the poet says that we always believe that somehow good will ultimately come out of evil, that good is the final goal of all, that everything which is negative will end in something positive, that everything in this world, anything that happens in this world has a purpose, that nothing takes place by accident, that not a worm is cloven in vain. Ultimately, everything that is evil, everything that is negative will result in something good, something positive. This canto deals with the mystery of evil. Philosophers down the centuries, including Indian philosophers, have grappled with the problem of evil. There has never been a society, there has never been a culture, there has never been an existence devoid of evil. Why is there evil in this world? How can we solve the problem of evil? Swami Vivekananda used to say that according to Advaita Vedanta, The quantum of evil in this world is constant. Ultimately, evil cannot be destroyed, evil cannot be created. Evil can only be transformed. Evil which is removed in one point reappears in another point. Evil which is removed in one form reappears in another form. As the canto comes to an end, the poet admits his state of ignorance, his state of helplessness. He declares that he is only an infant crying in the night, an infant crying for the light with no language but a cry. He is no philosopher, he is no intellectual. He does not have an answer to the questions of existence. He does not have a solution to the problem of evil. He is only a child crying in the night for light. In Canto 55, the poet says that the human desire for immortality, the human desire for life after life, originates from the divine spark in the human soul. There is a divine element in the human being. And this divine element, this godly instinct in us, and nature appears to be in strife because nature is so random, so careless, so callous. Nature does not care for the individual. Nature does not care for the unit. Thus, there is a strife, there is a struggle between the godly instinct in us and nature. The poet has no firm ground of evidence. He clings to the blind faith in a divine purpose in the universe, that there is some divine will operating behind everything that happens in this universe. In Canto 55, the poet says that nature does not care for the individual, for the unit, it cares only for the species. In Canto 56, the poet corrects himself. It appears to him that nature does not care even for the species. For 1,000 types have perished. There are numerous types of birds, of animals, of plants that have disappeared once and for all. An entire species suffers extinction, and this is something that happens quite often. Nature is seen by the poet as red in tooth and claw. Nature is a world of anarchy, cruelty, violence, injustice, immorality. Man, with his moral and spiritual aspirations, with a mind reaching out to an eternal embodiment of love and wisdom, may also disappear as a species and lie entombed one day like any other extinct type, like any other extinct species within the iron hills. Man is only part of nature's moral anarchy. The canto deals with the mystery of nature, the mystery of existence. And the canto makes it clear that we cannot solve the mystery. We cannot explain the mystery. What hope of answer or redress behind the veil, behind the veil? All we can see in the world of nature is arbitrariness, unreasonableness, anarchy, violence, bloodshed, death, extinction. In Canto 57, the poet says that the poet admits that this is a song of woe, this is a song of sorrow, and an earthly song, a song of sorrow which is very much rooted on this earth. There is no place, there is no space in such a song for philosophical speculations. Hallam, who is the subject matter of this elegy, is richly enshrined in his work. On the other hand, the poet shall pass, the poet shall breathe his last, and his work shall be forgotten. The fact is that the death bell that was rung in honor of the passing away of Hallam will continue to ring in his ears as long as he lives. And Hallam is praised as the sweetest soul that ever looked with human eyes. Ave and adieu. Hail and goodbye. Hail and farewell will continue to be repeated as the strokes of the bell forever. I don't know whether I am reading too much into this canto when I say that we can locate the trace of a rivalry between Hallam and Tennyson, between subject and speaker. The poet believes that Hallam has been immortalized because he is enshrined in this work. He also says that one day he will die, the poet will die, and his work will be forgotten. Is it because he is at least very slightly envious of Hallam? It may be pointed out that there was a mild rivalry between Milton and Edward King, between speaker and subject, between poet and protagonist, as far as Lycidas is concerned. Canto 58 is a sort of continuation of Canto 57. Referring to Canto 57, the poet says, in those sad words I took farewell. Referring to Canto 57, the poet says, these are the words through which I expressed farewell. And he compares those sad words through which he expresses farewell to Hallam, who left this world forever, to the echoes of water falling drop by drop in burial vaults, and says that other mourners, that his fellow mourners, were also overwhelmed by his lamentation. The high muse reproves the poet. The high muse is usually identified with Urania for spreading such a fruitless grief among those who shared the poet's sense of loss, and asks him to wait for some time so that he can collect himself and take a nobler leave, be able to speak with greater confidence, be able to speak with more positive energy. Canto 59 is an apostrophe to sorrow. It begins with some of the most beautiful lines in memoriam AHH. I shall read them. O sorrow, wilt thou live with me? No casual mistress, but a wife, my bosom friend and half of life, as I confess it needs must be. The poet says that he wants sorrow to live with him, not as a mistress, but as his wife, as part of his life. I have already pointed out that T.S. Eliot called Tennyson the great master of melancholia. Throughout his life, Tennyson was obsessed with the emotion of sorrow, the emotion of grief. And this obsession was responsible to some extent for making him the great poet that he became. The poet wants sorrow to become his central passion. He wants sorrow to become his bosom companion. He will seek to learn from sorrow what she has to teach. And what he learns from sorrow, he will set forth. And the world will hardly suspect the source of his productions. Only he will know that they have been inspired by sorrow. I would like to bring into conjunction with Canto 59 of In Memoriam AHH, the beautiful lyric beginning with the words, "Tears, idle tears," from the Princess of Lord Tennyson. I learned it by heart when I was a schoolboy, but I think I've forgotten it now. Let me try to remember the lines. Tears, idle tears, I know not what they mean. Tears from the depth of some divine despair rise in the heart and gather to the eyes when looking on the happy autumn fields and thinking of the days that are no more. It is very difficult for me to recite these lines without allowing tears to come to my own eyes. In Canto 60, the poet declares that he cannot discard the thought of his loss and presents Hallam, presents his friend as a noble soul, as somebody superior to himself, and presents himself as some poor girl who falls in love with an aristocrat. The aristocrat interacts with persons of his own class, of his own rank, and the girl feels envious of them. The girl is teased by her neighbors, and at night she weeps. How vain am I? How should he love a thing so low? This canto gives a vivid picture of Victorian society with its rigid class distinctions and the difficulties faced by persons of lower rank, of lower class persons in conducting romances, in marrying aristocrats. I shall be speaking in some detail regarding the picture of Victorian England that is found in In Memoriam AHH later. But one of the points I shall be making is that Victorian society was a society of rigid class distinctions, and this is reflected graphically in the poem.